Exeter. Opening announcements, which you should all know off by heart, I would think by now. Can I request those joining remotely to mute their microphones and turn off their cameras unless they're speaking? Reminder for everyone, this meeting today is being live streamed. Item 1, apologies. I have apologies from Councillor Arnott. Are there any other apologies? No. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Can I remind members to declare interest at the appropriate time in relation to agenda items? Minutes of the 17th of September have been previously circulated. Are you happy to accept that they're an accurate record and that I can sign them as such? Proposed, seconded, all those in favour? Yes, as long as I've got a majority of hands, I'm happy. Hold on. Thank you. Oh, there we are. Thank you. There are no items under item 4 requiring urgent attention. None have been brought to my attention. Thank you. Item 5, the Beacon Solar Energy Project. As you may be aware from an email that we sent to you all yesterday, based on information we have received, the council have been notified that the application for the development consent order regarding Beacon Solar Energy Project has been withdrawn by the developer from the NCPIP process, which is a national process. I am therefore proposing that we do not consider and discuss the report, as there's no longer a live application and there's no decision to be made. The applicant may submit a further application and this will be brought to a further meeting. So therefore any discussion, allowing any discussion at this point, might be prejudicial to any future application and might lead you to a situation of predetermination if you state a view that can clearly be interpreted as a view for or against any such application on the said site. I'll just ask the officer to give you a copy to read out what the developers formally said to us, and I will then formally move that we withdraw this item from the agenda.
Good morning. It was what we received was basically what was in that email that was sent to you. I'll just read it out. Following the collection of environmental and technical data over the last 18 months, the proposed Beacon Solar Farm is undergoing further assessment in terms of its layout, scale and detailed design. While this process is ongoing, there will be a pause to the consultation process, and as such, the project has been withdrawn from the NSIP process, the Nationally Significant Infrastructure Project process. Further updates will be issued in due course following the completion of the various technical assessments.
I think it's also worth adding that if a new application is presented, it might be in a different format than the existing one, and may not be an NZIP allocation and might therefore come directly to us as local authorities, which is yet again another reason why we should not be discussing anything regarding the former application as it now is. So therefore I move that we withdraw this item from the agenda. Is there a seconder? Second. All those in favour? Thank you. I now call on Fergus Pate to present the report on updated standards on highway adoption.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Fergus Pate. I am your relatively new Highways and Infrastructure Development Manager, so leading the Highways Development Management team. Got my colleague Andrew Hoyle in the room here, who is an expert Highways Agreements Officer, responsible day to day for working on various sites, in his case across Exeter, on adopting new roads constructed by developers. So I'm going to give a brief presentation on item 6. This is updated standards for the adoption of highways ordinarily constructed by developers. And what's coming up is a quick run through of why we need these updated standards. I thought it'd be useful to talk about the main stages of the adoption process, some of the risks and challenges that we face, touch on some of the key proposed changes in the document. You'll appreciate the appendix is extensive. Future work on updating our design guidance on the layout of streets within developments, which isn't before you today, and then just to recap on the recommendations. So first on those updated standards, well, you can see there on the right, the last time that we updated our standards for constructing new highways was back in 2006. Clearly the world has moved a lot since then. The updated standards that are before you today reflect key council priorities. They respond to national guidance and other good practice when it comes to constructing streets and associated infrastructure. They reflect enhanced safety and accessibility standards, walking, wheeling, cycling, moving amongst neighbourhoods. And getting these standards in place will hopefully lead to greater levels of consistency across Devon as different developments are coming forward. Up-to-date standards, everybody working and using the same page. So I said I would talk about the highway adoption process. And I've laid out here, this is a developer-led process. The developer constructs the streets and comes forward to the county council so that as highway authority we can adopt. In green, you've got the activities that are led by the developer. This isn't an exhaustive list, it's just some of the highlights. And that was in light green, and in dark green, a summary of our responsibilities, ranging from commenting on planning applications at a relatively early stage when they come forward, through to approving the more detailed drawings and designs of developers in accordance with the standards, the sorts of standards that are before you today, entering into section 38 or 278 highway agreements relating to the construction of those new streets and highways, to legal agreements by which officers like Andrew will then inspect the construction of these new streets, make sure that all remedial works are completed by the developer following that extensive construction and inspection process, which can be quite lengthy. And then the highways are adopted and become maintainable at public expense. And we need to ensure value for money for the public purse. So that's a summary. Of course, there's more to it, but hopefully that's helpful. And what we're looking to avoid really at different grades or gradations is highways that are adopted that then present maintenance liabilities. And some of those might be relatively modest, but over time, inadequate construction approaches can lead to quite significant challenges, as you see there, and they need to be remediated and funded by the public purse. So that's what we're trying to avoid by updating our standards and hopefully getting to a place. These images aren't so much about how the homes look and how they're set within the neighbourhood, but we've got a couple of well-constructed streets here that respond to good practice, good national good practice, and hopefully will remain robust over the long term, over decades to come, and that's what we're looking for. So I said I'd talk about some of the key changes within the updated adoption standards. One of the key changes relates to the use of warm mix asphalt as opposed to a hotter mix. Lower temperature mixes use less energy, they're environmentally more sustainable, but also can be denser and more durable. So that's one of the key pillars of the standards. Geogrids, still relatively novel, but we've got some guidance on the use of geogrids, which can help to stabilise otherwise unstable ground, enabling streets to be constructed more safely, more suitably, and actually this can enable more efficient use of land for development, bringing more land into the developable envelope, if you like, stabilising that ground, and therefore you can actually go ahead and construct. We're looking at enhanced footway construction depths, hopefully that's fairly self-explanatory, making them more robust so that they last for longer, requiring less maintenance and keeping them open to pedestrians and cyclists on a long-term basis. And there's also guidance on testing, like lightweight deflectometer testing, which is a great way of going back once streets have been constructed to make sure consistently that the quality, the grade of construction is fair and even across the street area. So using this fairly, I was going to say low impact, but clearly there is an impact. But portable method, which isn't disruptive, doesn't involve so much digging up the road, which is really beneficial and efficient. So guidance on the use of that testing as well. Now, I did touch on the possible need for future placemaking guidance around how a street's laid out, what street furniture do they provide, how are they attractive to people who want to dwell and meet their neighbours, etc., etc. I think parts 1, 2 and 3 of that 2006 guidance talk in those terms, but that was laid out 20 years ago. What's before you today is an update to part 4 of the guidance. My view is that there is a need to go back and review parts 1, 2 and 3 in response to our recently adopted local transport plan, other guidance that's emerging, including the National Planning Policy Framework, which is out for consultation by the government right now. Let's get some feedback from stakeholders like other local planning authorities and others involved in the process, and yourselves obviously, and then work up some updated placemaking guidance. But we're not in that place today. I just wanted to make it known that those thoughts are there at this relatively early stage. And then finally, the recommendations. Well, the recommendations are to approve the updated standards at the appendix, to approve application of those standards to new highways that we are adopting, and to delegate authority to the Deputy Director for Planning, Jamie Holland, to manage publicity and introduction of those updated standards, including engaging with developers and their contractors to make them aware of what's come forward. Thank you, Chair.
We'll deal with this in 2 parts. First of all, we'll deal with any questions of clarification on the officer's report or things that you want to be developed on that. I will then move the recommendation, hopefully find a seconder for the recommendation, and then we'll debate, if need be, the recommendation and if there are any amendments at that stage, and then eventually vote through. So we'll work through those stages. So are there any people who would like to ask questions? I see Councillor Eade, Councillor Cox, Councillor Ketchin, and Councillor Abbott. Right. I'll take them in that order. Councillor Eade.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the report. There seems to be a lot of non-technical elements in there that I think a contractor would find reasonable and we'd all find reasonable, but I'm not sure why they appear in a standard for highway adoption. So, for instance, requirements on noise limits and just sort of safe working practices, which is all good stuff. But I don't believe we would ever say as a highway authority, we're not adopting this highway because you made too much noise during construction. So can you just clarify that?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question and right. I think we're providing some useful guidance that points to appropriate working practices during the construction. We have officers out on site working across the wider public authority, and we work closely with local planning authority colleagues. So it's guidance in that vein. But you're right, the thrust of the guidance is around how are the highways constructed. And are they constructed to an adoptable standard? So yeah, I believe that's correct.
And is that something we're going to be doing inspections regularly? Is that something we'd be checking up on, sort of noise and safety and sort of temporary things of concern?
I will call upon my colleague if I need to. But I think the short answer is no. There are other advisors that ordinarily undertake that work. But there is team working across different departments and different organisations. But no, you're right. We aren't the Environmental Health Service, for example.
So one more question, Chair, if that's right. Page 70, it talks about application of weed killer. And my understanding was the County Council had moved away from using weed killer. Can you clarify? Is this about? It's not mandating the use of weed killer. Is it just guiding how it should be used if it's used?
Chair, would it be okay if I bring my colleague up to assist?
Weed killing expert.
Indeed.
So the weed killing aspect was taken from our term maintenance contract. That is what we use across Devon currently for when we're maintaining the highway.
We're not in the standard saying you must use weed killer if it's not necessary, for example?
Not when it's not necessary, no. But there are aspects where we will use it to ensure the longevity of the maintenance of the construction to stop any weeds obviously growing through the construction and then causing a liability later.
Okay, thanks.
Just concerned about the grid underneath. We've got a site in Teignmouth where springs are appearing left, right, and centre because Haldon is effectively Little Haldon is a vast sponge used to supply Teignmouth's water supply. So this site, which was until 1935 Bishop's Langton, is now in Teignmouth. There's springs appearing everywhere, and they put where they put the spoil. They didn't look at the old Ordnance Survey maps. There were springs there. So what happens if water undermines the road? The road might carry on sitting above there, and it'd be undermined, and we'll end up with sinkholes.
Chair, I'm glad I brought a specialist with me.
So that would obviously be a site-by-site specific case. So we'd need to look at that at the moment of that site and what was necessary to prevent that, whether it was maybe a drainage blanket or something like that to ensure that the highway wasn't at risk later on.
Councillor Ketchin.
Two questions. One is the cost issues of this. To me, this reads sort of a bit like an engineering report, and I'm not a civil engineer, so I'm kind of a little bit over my head, some of it. But essentially it comes down to costs. You know, who's going to carry the costs for good engineering works? Is this change, I didn't, and I wasn't quite sure what actually the changes in practice were either, having been to the lab down at Ottery and seen the work they do, and they already do a lot of this work. I wasn't quite sure then what were actually changes. So I guess my question is are there cost implications for delivering schemes should this be approved? Is it making it more expensive, or is it just tightening up practice? That's for developers.
Yeah, thank you. I think ordinarily this is about regularising and bringing together good practice and standards that have evolved over the last 20 years. It's providing clarity to developers. So in terms of the administrative costs and the specification costs of bringing forward a scheme, actually they know more where they stand. I mentioned that there has been some strengthening of standards, but that's something that has evolved over the decades. This isn't a sudden cliff edge, and hopefully it leads to good quality developments. So no, there isn't a sudden shift in the cost to developers. No.
My other question was a follow-on from Councillor Reid. My understanding in Exeter is glyphosate is not being routinely sprayed on the roads, and I think it may be completely stopped. We get sort of conflicting reports, and every time we write to ECC, it's a slightly different story. But the bottom line is glyphosate is not routinely sprayed in Exeter, and a lot of people are acutely aware of that because you can see the sort of the effects of it and make your own view on whether that's the right thing or not. I think this document seems out of sync with current practice on spraying. I don't feel the council can be going to developers and telling them that we mandate spraying when we don't do it ourselves. And I think we need to have another look at that, just to make sure that we are aligned with county council practice.
Chair, certainly happy to take that away and make any updates as necessary, speaking with colleagues.
Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. You gave some illustrations for your presentation, and the first one apparently started with weeds growing through the various cracks. It was the four photographs in one, and is that the issue that you were making? You put them up, but without comment.
Yes.
Okay, and on your next one, the next image, and next slide, you state that as being a good example. For me, it has all the boundaries that would allow those weeds to grow as before. It's just a newer estate and they have not grown, and I can't see what the advantage is. But secondly, and a point I want to develop later, there's no cycleways there.
If I can do those in reverse, because I absolutely take that point, and that's why I was keen to emphasise the importance of placemaking and layout guidance. I mean, in the second image, there's no footway either. Yeah. But yeah, I wanted to make it clear that this is about the quality of construction and not necessarily the quality of placemaking in these images. As for the first point, I think part of the solution is around the quality of construction in accordance with our specifications. I might invite Andrew to say anything more he wants to add in terms of those crossings and the weed risk.
So quite often the problem with weeds is you'll end up getting seeds at an early stage in the construction. So that is one reason why the weed killing is in there, to ensure that they don't appear at a later stage and then causing issue with the surfacing and causing rutting in the footways, and obviously then creating slips and trips and a maintenance liability for us as a highway authority later.
Well, I'm not sure I could agree with that commentary and the way the natural world will take over, but I would like to move on to my other two questions. I have seen the process of road change recently where I live, and the standards would not have been maintained if we hadn't had the, I think perhaps, serendipitous visit by a Devon County Council engineer who brought the whole thing under control. This was by a third party, people who took over the road, and they were their own contractors. We have no guarantee by setting standards that someone else will maintain will build the road properly. So we've seen from the visit to East Devon that the way the materials can be monitored, but that seems to be by coring, and that would be a shame to do in a brand new road. So unless, if you can show me that it's there already. We have inspectors on site all the time. Oh, you're nodding. Oh no, all right, I'll let you answer. Then we have no assurance of construction standards.
Chair, I was keen to point out this summary of the process, which again, back to the darker green blocks, leads from the standards that we're talking about today to the highway agreements, which are legal agreements, and then to colleagues like Andrew and others from across the organisation, either approving specifications, including the materials lab, or in Andrew's case, being on site at a regular basis, liaising with developers and contractors to understand when critical works are being undertaken so that they can inspect whilst those works are being undertaken. Of course, the team has finite resources. They're dealing with multiple developments at any one time. But yes, those in-person inspections are happening and are so crucial to the adoption process.
So sorry, just to make that a supplementary on that question, because I still want one more, please. Therefore, it would be good to have an understanding of that inspection regime and the pressures put upon you, because I can well imagine you just don't have the time to get out and do stuff. But it becomes the crucial element to look at these people, even to the extent that the contractor would put out the road diversion signs on the footpath, not on the road, therefore blocking everybody, able-bodied and disabled-bodied, in using the roads on the diversion route.
I'm not sure that was a question or just a statement.
It was a question for, will we have oversight of the inspection regime?
Very happy to provide a further summary of what's involved in the inspection process. Of course, to some extent it is site specific, but we could provide some sort of diary or sample of the process involved. But again, inspectors like Andrew are on site 3-4 days a week. They do have a portfolio of sites, but they are applying these standards in liaison with the developer and their contractor. But yeah, happy to take that action, Chair.
So last question. You put up a photograph of weight testing by dropping a weight. How are you measuring distortion? Are you doing it with acoustic sensors, microphones, or are you monitoring vertical displacement with LiDAR or something like that?
I think that's one we'd need to take away and get the further details on. It is, I can tell you it does measure it in Newton meters, I think it is. So it's like a 50 kilo, yeah, so it's a 50 kilo weight that's dropped. And it's dropped 9 times. And then the first 3 of that you ignore, because that's known as settling. And then you take the 6 other readings. And then you can see, could you flick back, Fergus, to that slide? So you can see the red there. So that isn't what we want. We want the ones in green. So the red is an unacceptable value. And then we convert that into a CBR, known as a California bearing ratio, which is a standard measurement for determining highway construction.
Thank you. I look forward to the understanding the process better. Thank you.
Turning into a seminar for it. Councillor Connaught.
Thank you, Chairman. It does seem to me, and I appreciate we're going to have a general conversation now, it does seem to me that obviously the guidance is written for a technical purpose with developers in mind, but not written for the residents who experience this. I have some questions. I really liked the point that Councillor E made about noise, because I too couldn't understand why noise was in here, because this is about an adoption standard. Noise is generally managed through the development control process of local authorities, but the things that people complain about are builders on a Sunday or a Saturday afternoon, or very early starts in the summer, and those sorts of things. So either noise is in there for a strategic purpose, or I can't see it. If we're talking about adopting a road, I can't see why it's in there. That's not to say I think noise is not important. I think it's very important, and if I like it in there, but I just think either we should assume one day we might be a unitary authority and we ought to say what our time limits are, or it will not to be in there. Other ones, Chairman, because I think they're just subjective, like mud on the road, and it says it shouldn't be near the site. Well, if I'm a developer, I might think 10 metres is near enough. You, the council, might think it's 100 metres. The residents who live nearby might think the first 10 miles of mud off the road. I didn't see, for example, that we require wheel washes or those things, or that we've enforced them where we do. But mud on the road is one of the things that comes up in most county councils' post bags about any development anywhere. And if the word near is what's in our guidance, it's subjective, isn't it? So how does our officer go on site and say to the site manager, I want the road cleaned up till, and someone says, no, that's too far. You know, your guidance says near, and I've decided as the manager, near is there. All right, so who wins on that one? So it's floppy, it's vague. And just the other one, because I think, Chairman, part of what Mr. Pate said was this was about avoiding expense. But one of the silly things in here is about street nameplates, and they are to be installed to the satisfaction of the district council and the county council. Do we not trust the district council to put up nameplates? Do we need to go and second guess them, or do we just need a reserve right? So when the district has said, yeah, put them, that's fine. Most district councils I know have got a fairly organised system of getting the right names in the right places. Though I have to say, at South West Exeter, East Devon Council had their logos on all of the Teambridge nameplates. A land grab if ever there was one, Chairman. But so maybe that does need second guessing. But that's why they've got a couple of good councillors who spotted that and got it changed. But Chairman, is that what we mean? That we really do need to, even on a simple thing like that, we really need to have double the cost? Shouldn't we try to strip cost out? We either trust our district partners, or we think this could only be done by a county officer, don't we? Chairman, I'm going to save my other comments for the general conversation. Thank you.
Is there a response you can offer?
Yes, I think so. I think we had a good discussion about noise previously. It's strategic guidance as opposed to something that we will inspect when it comes to the final adoption of the road. Mud on the road and distance, absolutely understand the point. And this is, I think the challenge with being too specific in terms of distance is that the circumstances will vary from site to site. If it's demonstrably the case that the mud is attributable to the site, then our start point is that we're dealing with that mud. Yeah, whether that's 100 metres or 170 metres, it could be unfortunate to impose an arbitrary cut off within this guidance. But you're welcome views on that, Chair. The team do work incredibly hard when they're on site and dealing with contractors to minimise mud on the roads, including pushing for wheel washing. It's particularly challenging at this time of year, and we do also put out regular communication to developers and contractors to emphasise the point, because we know how important it is. On street nameplates, Councillor Connick talked about a reserve right, and I think, or words to that effect, and I think that's absolutely right. As I said before, colleagues are on site on a regular basis. It is extremely rare that we would have anything to say about the placement of street signs, but we're just holding that in place. So ordinarily officers wouldn't need to do anything. There wouldn't be any duplication in cost. District colleagues will get the street nameplates in the right place at the right time. There's just a reserve provision in this guidance, but it's very rarely needed.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Just to say that both my questions have just been asked by the previous two councillors, but I just wanted to add that as a district councillor as well as a county councillor, it's both been illuminating and a little bit also confusing about, for example, if I see, we've just been talking about mud and water on the road, particularly in Ilfracombe, we get a lot of that from developments, as to where we should go. Normally I would go to my district council planning authority as an enforcement issue, but obviously now this is giving me more information about what the bigger picture, but also I'm a little bit confused as if that happens, am I actually going to the right place? Thank you.
Yes, I think you ordinarily are. Or very often planning permissions will be granted with conditions relating to the agreement of matters like a construction environment management plan, and some of the details that we're talking about here today relate to those planning conditions. But I think there's a theme here around agreements officers, our inspectors, being on site and working day to day with developers and their contractors and seeking to tighten things up further, given the privileged position they've got, being on site. But yes, you are starting in the right place.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Carney.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to speak about drains and drainage. With the biblical rain that we've had for the last few days and for the length of time that it has been raining, because it's been raining for nearly a month solid now, the drains that we're putting in, I'm sure would have been of a standard of weather that we had in the past. But if the weather's actually going to get worse and we're going to get more of this rain, especially when the rain falls at the rate that it falls, as opposed to drizzling all day, are the drains going to be able to sustain the amount of water to stop flooding? And especially in a rural area where I live, there's an awful lot of water which is still left lying about because drains have been blocked, and that adds to the problem when the rain comes again. Thank you.
It's a good question, and I think there are a few parts to the answer, Chair. I think possibly harks back to the previous question about the role of the local planning authority, and in this case, the advice that they take from the lead local flood authority, so colleagues with that specialism and or the Environment Agency in some cases. I think the other side that we touched on in this slide about the process is the importance of drainage being adopted by Development Water Authority before our highways can be adopted, and there's a testing process involved for the Water Authority to take on that drainage to make sure that it's robust and hasn't moved and is stable, so that we're taking on a highway asset which is controlled by the Water Authority and isn't our liability because they've already got it. But in terms of the modelling and capacity to accommodate drainage needs, ordinarily it's the LLFA that will advise as part of the planning application process. Andrew, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Councillor Carson.
Thank you, Chair. How long will it take for these updated standards, if we approve them, to filter down to site then?
I think, as I say, a lot of these standards and good practice are already being applied. And so if approved, this, to some extent, this is about regularising that. But the plan is to disseminate the information very quickly. We have a lot of contact information for developers and contractors. There are developer forums in certain parts of the county where we can get the news out as well. So it would be very rapid. And as I say, we're speaking with developers on a daily basis. We would also publish the standards on our web pages, ideally as a series of web pages as opposed to PDFs, but we need to work through the technicalities of that. But yeah, really quickly, we want to get these online as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you. Supplementary, please, Chair. So can these new standards be applied retrospectively to planning applications that have already been approved?
To some extent, it will depend on where we are through the process, but when it comes into planning permissions that have been granted and now we're at the point where we are looking at technical details and entering into those legal agreements, but at that earlier stage in the process, yes, absolutely. But again, a lot of these standards in recent years have been used in practice. It's just that the guidance has been in several different places and a little bit unclear for contractors.
Can I ask 2 points which haven't been covered yet? In relation to the last point on the PowerPoint in front of us, the highways adopted and the remainder of the bond is released. Can we not have a situation where liability liability lands with the developer for a period of time after the work is carried out to ensure the quality of the work? If we're concerned about the quality of the work and whether we can manage inspections, etc., surely there should be some sort of warranty with the work to ensure the developer carries it out to the standard. And surely if there was sort of 2 or 3 year holding of the bond after the highway is adopted, that would give some reassurance to residents and to council taxpayers that there's money to cover any inadequate work that's been done, and the developer is more than likely to get the work done to the standard in the first place. Is that something we can impose, or is that a national agreement?
No, it's a good question. And in the light green there, third box from the bottom, I think we have a version of that where the highway is completed, but it's maintainable at the developer's expense for a period. Ordinarily, that is 12 months, but there are circumstances where risks are higher, where maybe that period needs to be extended. Extending beyond 12 months is often on a case-by-case basis.
But you have that power to extend that sort of, I would call it, warranty period in the light of the individual needs of a situation.
Yes, Chair.
Right. Second point, with the increasing use of electric vehicles and their increased weight, does the highway construction take account of the additional weighting? Because I know we have problems in multi-storey car parks that can't cope with electric vehicles. So have electric vehicles been effectively worked into the system of standards we're now working to, so we aren't getting highways showing defects after a shorter period because of the additional weight of electric vehicles?
So within the standard, there is a part about how many, is it million per square axles it is across a surface in a given time. So it does allow for higher vehicles, you know, bin lorries, removal lorries and things like that.
But increasingly SUVs and electric cars are, you know, a considerable weight or equivalent to those.
Chair, I think there's a theme around responding to the most up-to-date standards. I talked about some of that thickening of profile of construction and it being more robust, but probably we can't be in a place where we're leaving it another 20 years before updating our standards again.
Thank you. And one final point, in relation to this work generally in relation to transport and highways, is this a duty that will later transfer to the CCA?
To my knowledge, that's not the expectation at the time.
Move on to allow for the debate. I will move the recommendation as printed, and if we could display that one again. The committee be asked to approve and update standards of highway adoption set out in Appendix 1 of the report. B, they approve application of the standards for highway adoption to highway and development schemes where the council is asked to adopt and maintain new highway infrastructure. C, delegate authority to the Deputy Director of Planning or the nominated representative to manage publicity and the introduction of updated standards, including making minor changes necessary during publication of the guidance or to enhance its effectiveness. I so move. Is there a seconder? Several places. Seconded. The recommendations. I've got Councillor Ketchum first of all, and then Councillor Collett.
I'm very happy to support this, obviously, because this is just about core work that the DCC needs to get on with. There was a comment that the officers would take away the issue of the spraying and get it aligned with the county council's current practice, or make it flexible enough that it can keep up with the ever-changing county council practice. Is that therefore in recommendation C, including making minor changes necessary during publication, blah, 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 blah? Does that give you sufficient flexibility to do that, or do we need to have some kind of amendment?
I don't think we need an amendment. I just think we want the officers' reassurance this matter will be, and we will get a response as a committee to the query you've raised. I think we saw it taking it on board, but at the same time, you and other members just want the reassurance it has been looked at and a response is given.
But thank you, Chairman. I disagree with the advice just given. I think Councillor Ketchum should move an amendment or a new item at D to capture that point. In the roundness, Chairman, Mr. Pate said at his introduction that it's 20 years since we've reviewed these. And I dread to think it might be another 20 years before we review what the committee might approve today. I say that because life does move on, and I suppose had I known, and maybe if I knew it, I've overlooked it, but had I known we were going through this work, I might have suggested that perhaps we had a member workshop to pick up some of the things that all members might feel and experience, some of the things that I've talked about earlier, and the two things I want to talk about now. At South West Exeter, which is one of the biggest developments, one of the issues that infuriates residents who've moved into houses is street lighting, Chairman, as in it isn't there. And as a council, we can't say when the developers will be putting it in. And the developers seem remarkably reluctant to say when they'll be putting it in as well, because it's different developers involved, an age-old problem. But we've just built a brilliant road, the new Chudley Road. It's got street lighting on it. When you come to the end of that, there is no street lighting running alongside where actually people are walking, where the kids are walking to school. And that seems to me, if I say a failure of planning, that's not an individual thing, that's a system thing. But any developer surely would be thinking about it, but we can't say when it happens. So for me, these new standards don't deal with lighting. And then I want to pick up on an issue where I didn't follow all of the technical stuff, but the use of brick pavers. So we saw some really lovely pictures of some great developments. But if you go to Exminster, to the Mowbray Farm development, its pavements are brick pavers. And when it was built, they look smashing. Absolutely better than, bitumen and all the rest of that. They're wonderful. But as the years have rolled on, they are a breeding ground for weeds. But no one sprays weeds. No one weeds. When the council adopted those roads, it doesn't maintain them, it doesn't do anything, but it also adopted a couple of brick planters actually that were built by the developer. I think we have 3 of the 6. I don't know who owns the other 3, but we've collected them, but we don't maintain them either. They are a breeding ground for weeds. And we just say to people, well, if you want to look after them, do so. And I say that in the generality that I'm not convinced that what's before the committee today actually deals with the kind of issues that residents experience when they move into new developments, and they're expecting the authority, the powers that be, to have done something, to have sorted these things out. So I'm not going to vote for this. And in fact, if it doesn't succeed, I think it would be better being deferred in order to get some real member engagement and see whether we can have adoption standards that actually reflect the issues and anxieties of our residents who buy new homes. And we need new homes. We do. Absolutely. But we need new homes, and we can't go on repeating the things that we've done in the 70s, 80s, 90s onwards. And we ought to learn from the things that have happened. And I've been banging on about paviors in this place for a long time. And people said, oh, no, we're not going to use them. So they might look brilliant in, say, a shopping centre where you've got the regular maintenance and you've got all the team. But when you go to a housing development and the weeds are just going through the cracks and in the sand, they look absolutely awful. People feel that their area is unloved and it's just wrong, and we've got an opportunity to do something about it. So I'm going to vote against the recommendation, and if it fails, I'm going to then move a deferment so we can actually get some member engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. I did like the point about that you support the extension of Exeter into Teambridge. I'm very pleased that your boundaries. Also, I should point out the point of Councillor Cashin, the minutes will reflect comments and questions posed by members for the officers to follow up and take account of. Councillor Carson first, then point of order. Or yours a point of order? Because you've already,
Alan, a supplementary.
Sorry,
of
you've already spoken.
It's about the officers should have an opportunity to respond to Councillor Connett's suggestion.
No, this is the debate.
That's
questions
right.
and
This
answers.
is a debate. This is a debate, and I'm a councillor and I'm debating. There is.
And you've already spoken.
I
and you speak
that.
once in a debate unless you're raising a point of order or a standing order issue. Well, those are the rules of debate at this council.
You've heard
councils.
my opinion.
For Carson.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back to the spraying of the weeds. If I've got this right, we're talking about the preparation for a road, spraying at that point in time, as opposed to spraying finished road surfaces on. Is that correct?
And we're in the situation we are debating. I will ask the officer at the end to make some concluding comments at the end of the debate before we take a vote, which is standard in planning committees. All right. So that will be noted and we'll deal with it at the end of any debate. Right. Further contributions. Councillor Davis.
Chairman, to be honest, it's not a question, and you're going to probably tell me off as well, but I don't really care. So I'm just going to say, I'm taking up Councillor Connett's point. I can't stand papers either. But Mr. Pate did say in his original comments, because we've got a consultation ongoing at the moment, which sadly I read yesterday, and I think that what would be useful, coming back to Councillor Connett's point, is a workshop on the points, the 12 particular points the government are consulting on. And they do include things like sustainable transport. They do include things like design. I think that's the point where we need to be getting involved as members. So we haven't, not keeping this as set in stone. We're looking to the future. And I think that's where we need to get involved, Councillor Connett, is the fact that we are going into a new world where the government are desperate to build these houses on every bit of land available, except national parks, of course. And I think that's where we need to be putting our effort. I declare an interest as chairman of the national park, but and I live in one. But I think that's where our time would be usefully spent rather than delaying this today.
Could I suggest, Vice Chair, are you moving that as an amendment to the recommendation to be an item D, requesting that a members' workshop be held in the terms that you said, which doesn't mitigate, I don't think, the other things, but enables all the issues that have been raised by members to be brought up in a different forum and then taken care of at a later stage?
Very happy to, if you'd like me to. There we are. Cross-party.
No. Right. So, right. First of all, we need clarification from the minute secretary that he has got an indication of what that amendment would look like before we come back to Councillor Davis and before we take a debate that and then vote on that amendment as an addition to the recommendation?
Yes, I believe so, Chair. Thank you. Councillor Davis was clear what she was proposing, I think.
Is any member unclear about what Councillor Davis was proposing as an amendment? Yes, you are unclear. All right. Ask the minute clerk to read out the amendment as he perceives was from what Councillor Davis has said.
Thank you. I'm very happy to defer to Councillor Davis as it was her recommendation.
So what I am suggesting as D is that we look as it doesn't need to be a committee meeting, it clearly shouldn't, a workshop on the government's proposals, and I leave it to the officers to tell us whether we need to wait until after, I think it's the 10th of March, when the closing date is, on the government's proposals for the way they see National Planning Policy Framework going with regard to particularly their 12 points that they came up with. Not all of them involve transport, but transport is clearly mentioned, as is design. And I think that will also embrace the point that somebody raised about drainage and climate change, because we are having rainfall in a different way. I think it will also give us the opportunity to comment about things like weed killer. I think it will give us the opportunity to talk about those dreaded pavers. Which I don't have any in my patch, but I still don't like them. It's all those issues that are coming up that Councillor Connett raised that our residents regularly contact us about. We can sort all of them out. I don't think this is the place to do it. I don't think we've looked at everything. I can honestly say until I've sat here, I haven't really thought about it in any great depth. And I think that's why we need to be able to have a private meeting where we all get together and come up with all the points. That isn't making it terribly clear, but basically I'm saying we need a workshop to discuss what's coming forward.
Are members clear on what Councillor Davis is proposing? Councillor Ketchin, we're now debating the amendment, so you can speak again.
I've got a point of order, if that's all right, Chair. I don't think there's a bit.
What standing order are you referring to?
I don't know. You're the chair. Maybe you can help me with that.
I've got them here if you'd like to give me a number.
Thank you very much for your assistance. The point of order, I don't think this is an amendment at all. This is not the core. We're looking at passing a paper or not about adoption of roads. There's a whole bunch of work maybe about design that we want to maybe have a working members group or a workshop on. The meeting, the chair can organise that on our behalf if that is our desire. I don't think it's a recommendation. It's not core to the paper. The paper is asking about road adoption, and therefore we can go away and have our workshop, but it's separate to the paper. That's my piece on that.
It's called an amendment because it is not amending the addition, it's an addition to the recommendation to allow this workshop to take place in a related issue to the main substance of the recommendation. So anyone else wish to speak on the amendment stroke addition to the recommendation? No. Or take a vote on those people who favour the item D as outlined by Councillor Davis being added to the recommendation. Those in favour? 8. Those against? Abstentions? 2. That is carried. We now have an amended recommendation made up of 4 parts. 3 previously put forward by the officers and the 4th by Councillor Davis, requesting we establish a workshop for members to look in some depth at some of the issues that arise from the public consultation currently underway. When now wish to speak further, or I'll put this matter of the recommendation as amended to the vote. Therefore, move from the chair the recommendation as previously shown with amendment D, which you have just approved, added to it. All those in favour, please show. 9. Those against? 1. Those abstentions? 1. 911. Heard that one somewhere before. We now move on to item 7, which I'll ask Rachel Tuckett to present her report on Devon Minerals Plan.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Rachel Tuckett. I'm a senior planning officer in the strategic planning team. We're bringing before you today the annual monitoring review from the Devon Minerals Plan. This is the 2023 annual monitoring review. I've got a brief presentation just setting out why it's in front of you and the sort of headlines from that, but most of the detail is in the report and the monitoring report itself. If you can cast your minds back to September, we brought before you the Devon Minerals Plan review. That was a comprehensive review of internal and external factors that influence the Devon Minerals Plan. So that was both the government changes, those sorts of things, but also looking at the monitoring and objectives and things within the plan. The committee endorsed the recommendations that were included in that review, and one of those amendments was to bring the annual monitoring reports before committee for you to note the contents of those before they're published. It is worth noting that there were additional recommendations for updating how we undertake the annual monitoring reports, but given the 2023 one was already in process when that recommendation was made, those changes will be made from 2024. So you won't see those changes from the mineral plan review reflected in this annual monitoring report, but you will in the 2024 one moving forwards. The same slide, there we go. So annual monitoring reports, what are they? We are required to prepare a monitoring report under the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004. They are a report on the extent to which the policies within the Devon Minerals Plan are being implemented. So it looks at the plan's objectives, policies and monitoring indicators. It assesses whether those are being successfully achieved and then makes a conclusion as to whether, because of those, a review of the plan is required. The report before you today is the 2023 report. A review is done through a RAG rating, that's a red, amber, green rating. Those that are highlighted red are obviously things where we're not meeting those targets. Amber is where there's a risk that those aren't being met, and green is where they're being met. Section 4 of the report sets out those key findings. Hopefully you've all had a chance to read those. However, I've put up in front of you the ones that have come out as red. They're the ones that we probably need to pay most attention to. Indicators 1.1 and 3.3, which relate to the number of operational metalliferous mineral sites in Devon, that remains at a red. That's due to the closure of Hemerdon mine down near Plymouth, a tungsten mine. It is still the case that there is an intention from the operator to reopen that mine. Therefore, we are not going to review the plan based on that at this time until that comes to a conclusion. Indicator 2.1, which is relates to applications approved by district councils contrary to safeguarding objections. We had one application, our target is 0. That was an application in Teambridge. We're keeping that under review. We've also, through the mineral plan review, have an action to work with local planning authorities on safeguarding. Indicator 3.4 relates to annual sales of China clay. The indicator came out as below our baseline. We're not selling as much across Devon as previous years. However, that's quite clearly reliant on the market. There's not a huge amount that as a county council we can do about that. What we can do is make sure that we have the ability to sell those resources should demand increase, and we've concluded that we do have those reserves. They're ready to be sold should the market demand increase. And then similarly, indicator 5.2 is again annual sales of building stone. Again, that was below our target. However, it's the same situation. There's a reliance on market and operator priorities. The plan is supportive of new sites. Those can come forward should that demand increase. As I said, very brief presentation on what's in front of you. Our recommendation to the committee is that you note the content of the annual monitoring review covering the 2023 calendar year, including the conclusions that no update to the minerals plan is required from our review of the 2023 data. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Abbott? If other, Councillor Eade? All right, we'll start with this. Doesn't preclude others joining in. We'll start with Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I have a query about the table with the indicator 6.1, the number of local quarry liaison groups. There's a baseline of 7. There's a result of 4, but it's green. Indeed, no reduction in the number of liaison groups may well be that it's been 4 for some time, and so therefore it remains green, but it seems to be missing the point, really.
I believe, I'll double check with Kate, but I believe that's because of quarry closures, and when the quarries have closed, the liaison group ceases. So it's a slightly misleading, I suppose, misleading stat in that, in theory, it should relate to the number of quarries we've got open. We should have liaison groups for those quarries rather than no reduction in them. Yeah, it's green because we have liaison groups for the quarries that are operational. That makes sense. Yeah.
Thanks. You may have told us before, but if so, can you remind me, why is this 2023? It seems very delayed and means that surely if any issues are identified, it's going to take a very long time for them to be rectified.
Yeah, it's a fair question. It's very delayed. We are slightly behind on our programme of annual monitoring reports. There are several reasons. Firstly, resources. We don't have the staff to do the annual monitoring reports as quickly as we'd like. And over the last 2 years, we prioritised doing the review of the mineral plan itself, so a more comprehensive review. But also we're reliant on external data and data being provided to us. And so that causes a delay as well. We are hoping at the next committee that you'll have the 2024 report in front of you, and then we'll be back on track with reporting the annual monitoring reports as they come forward. So you'll get the 2025 one later this year as well.
Okay, so normally we would expect to get them for the previous year.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so all right, okay.
Yeah.
One more question, Chair, if that's right. So on page 109, it talks about Teignbridge District Council approving that application contrary to our objection. And they're quoted as saying, it was considered the proposal would not adversely impact on mineral extraction. But it sounds like we said it would. So are they saying that we're wrong and they know best? Did they acknowledge our objection?
It's hard to diplomatically answer that question. We obviously, as we sent that objection, believed that there was a risk to safeguarding minerals through that application. Teignbridge disagreed based on there being an overriding strategic need for that development. As far as I understand, I don't know all the details of it. Is there anything you want to add? Phil? Okay.
We note Councillor Cox's declaration. Thank you.
Does that answer your question? Sorry.
Yeah, it just looks concerning, like the text that they've provided. It doesn't sound like they've acknowledged that we thought there was an issue, and it sounds like they were telling their planning committee that there wasn't an issue when we told them there was.
Yeah, so part of the mineral plan review, which you looked at in September, one of those recommendations was to work with local planning authorities to help understand safeguarding, what we're doing, what our responsibilities are, what we consider to be reasonable in terms of safeguarding. So yes, it's a decision we weren't overly happy with. It's obviously raised a concern through our report, but it's something that we're looking to address in the next year or so, is to have those more detailed conversations, possibly training with local planning authorities to make sure it doesn't happen again.
The position should be that statutory consultees' comments are included in the officer's report that went before Teambridge Planning, so they should have been fully aware of the views of the County Council. They're not allowed not to show those views, and the public will be aware from the public website of Teambridge, looking at the planning application, the views of Devon County Council, Fire Service and any other public body in relation to the application.
Thank you. I've just got a question about it's 5.2 in the plan. It's about the sales of building stone, which is a red because it's an 89% reduction, I believe, from the previous year, which presumably was 2022. I just wondered, it's a red, and yet in the notes it's saying basically there's nothing that we're going to do about it, or in the minerals plan at the moment. I'm just a little bit sort of questioning why we have reds and then there's no particular action involved with that.
Yeah, of course. So the conclusion on 5.2 is that yes, there is a significant reduction, but that reduction has not been caused by the minerals plan. It's been caused by external factors such as kind of market demand for those materials. The important thing to think about with that indicator is that there are sites available to meet that demand should that demand increase. So that's the responsibility of the plan, is not to create those sales, but it's to enable those sales, to make sure that we've got the stocks and we've got the sites. So the plan is supportive of new sites coming forward. There are also existing sites that have consent that can allow that to happen. But at the moment it's not happening. So it raises a flag for us to have a look at, but as an indicator, we can't actually change that outcome, if that makes sense.
Okay, so so what you're saying is we monitor it, but we actually have no levers to pull, nothing we can actually do to actually improve the situation. Is that right?
I'm just going to invite Emily to.
I think Rachel answered that question well, and I suppose it depends on what the reason for it is. So it's creating that red, it's making us look into it. If it's a factor that actually we think there's an issue with planning policy here, we think the plan needs to be changed, that flags it, then we can do something. But in this circumstance, it's not for the planning system. Okay.
Yeah, so for example, if we'd had several applications for building stone sites that we'd refused because of the plan, and that's what was causing the reduction in sales, we would need to look at the plan. Whereas actually the plan will enable those sites to come forward should the market require it. So it's just a slightly different way of looking at it.
Thank you.
Any further members' questions on the officer's report? No? I'll now move the recommendation as published, that the committee to note the contents of the annual monitoring report, the AMR, covering the 2023 calendar year, including the conclusion that no update to the Devon Minerals Plan is required. Is there a seconder? Yes, the Vice Chair seconded. Councillor Ketchen also. Does anyone wish to debate this issue, or do you wish, if there is no debate, I'll then move to the vote. But does anyone wish to debate, contribute a comment? I will therefore move it to the vote. Those in favour of the recommendation, please show. Those against? No. Unanimous. We now move on to item 8. It's pages 125 and 128 of your report, which are delegated decisions, and they're shown in District Council order. So it's just a matter of whether members have any questions they wish to raise. If not, we just accept the report. Any questions on any of those delegated decisions? I'm therefore move that we note the delegated decision report. Seconded? Yes. No one wishes to debate. All those in favour of accepting the report? Don't vote. Thank you. And that concludes the business of the meeting. And thank you for your attendance. Thank you.